Incredibly, 6,000 years before Stonehenge, hunter-gatherers in southeastern Turkey carved 20-ton pillars with only flint and somehow hauled them half a kilometer, without the wheel, animals, or agriculture to feed hundreds of workers. New chemical evidence and unfinished stone colossi reveal a construction method at Göbekli Tepe that modern scientists still cannot replicate. How did people who supposedly had nothing build the impossible, and what secret technique are today's experts struggling to explain? This is where Göbekli Tepe's biggest mystery begins. At Göbekli Tepe, the scale of craftsmanship stands out long before any stone was ever moved. Archaeologists measure the central pillars at 5.5 meters tall, weighing as much as 20 tons each, carved entirely from the limestone ridge beneath the site. No metal chisels or advanced tools have ever been found here. Instead, thousands of flint blades, scrapers, and picks litter the area, each one shaped and discarded by hands that worked stone the only way they knew how, through patience and repetition. The limestone itself is tough, crystalline, and riddled with natural fault lines. Workers dug deep channels around the outline of each pillar using nothing but sharpened flint, exploiting these weaknesses to free the stone. The process left behind unmistakable pitted marks, rough, uneven, and unmistakably human. No evidence points to copper or other metals, and microscopic studies of the tool marks are still absent from the record. Yet the results are astonishing. On the upright pillars, animal reliefs, foxes, scorpions, vultures, rise nearly 2 centimeters from the surface, carved with a precision that defies the simplicity of the tools. Some reliefs wrap around the stone's curves, their lines clean and deliberate, with no sign of hesitation or error. Dr. Salim Yalçın, a leading lithics expert, describes the process as a kind of choreography. Teams of workers would rotate shifts, each person taking a turn at pecking, scraping, and smoothing the stone. Over weeks or months, the pillar would slowly take shape, its sides squared, its top crossbar formed, and its surface prepared for detailed carving. The most intricate reliefs required not just raw strength, but a practiced hand, one that could control the pressure of a flint blade to create shadows and depth in solid rock. In the nearby quarry, the story takes a different turn. Here lies an unfinished monolith, still rooted in the bedrock after more than 11,000 years. Measuring nearly 3 by 3 meters at its base, this block is larger than any pillar yet discovered at the site. Its mass is estimated at close to 50 tons. Quarry trenches run along 2 sides, but the stone was never fully detached. No one knows why the work stopped, whether a flaw was found, a disaster struck, or the workforce simply moved on. The abandonment of this giant, frozen mid-extraction hints at the limits of Neolithic ambition and the unpredictable challenges these builders faced. The presence of both finished pillars and the abandoned colossus shows a mastery of stoneworking that predates agriculture by centuries. Each mark in the quarry, every carved relief, is a record of ingenuity, proof that even without the wheel or metal, these early builders understood their material, their tools, and the patience required to shape the impossible. The real puzzle at Göbekli Tepe begins once the pillars leave the quarry. Each T-shaped monolith, weighing up to 20 tons, had to be moved over 500 meters of rugged terrain without the help of wheels, draft animals, or any known vehicles. The limestone plateau drops sharply in places, littered with loose stones and hidden fissures. In the dry season, the ground bakes hard and uneven. After winter rains, it turns slick and treacherous. The route from the quarry to the enclosures is anything but straightforward. Archaeologist Dr. Amir Salik has spent years modeling how a society of hunter-gatherers could have accomplished this feat. His team mapped the 500-meter haul, factoring in every slope, outcrop, and seasonal change. Their simulations show that friction alone would have made dragging a 20-ton stone across bare rock nearly impossible. Even with a sledge fashioned from timber, the raw force required would snap ropes and splinter wood. The solution, Salik suggests, may have come from the land itself. Rainwater collected in shallow depressions, turning dust to mud and lowering friction just enough for movement. In experiments, teams poured water ahead of the sledge, reducing the drag by nearly half. Some tests swapped water for animal fat or plant oils, achieving even smoother passage. But even with perfect conditions, the numbers are staggering. Pulling a single pillar up the hill demands the strength of at least 40 people just to get it moving. Keeping it under control on a slope or around a bend calls for double that, 80 hands, each straining against the ropes. Symbolic field trials found that, for the largest stones, a minimum of 100 workers was needed to maintain steady progress and up to 500 for safety and coordination during the most dangerous stretches. The logistics become even more daunting when considering the site's scale, over 200 pillars, each requiring a dedicated haul. There are no signs of domesticated animals or wheeled carts anywhere in the archaeological record from this period. Everything points to pure human muscle, ropes twisted from wild plants, and sledges carved from local trees. The labor force required for a single pillar rivals that of a modern construction project. Yet these people had no farms, no stored grain, and no permanent villages. Feeding and organizing hundreds of workers would have been a monumental challenge for any Neolithic community. Symbolic argues that such efforts could only have been sustained during short seasonal gatherings, perhaps linked to feasts or rituals, rather than by a permanent workforce. This labor paradox sits at the heart of Göbekli Tepe's mystery. How did a society without agriculture muster the people, the food, and the will to build on such a scale? The answer may lie not just in brute strength, but in the planning and coordination that followed. 12 circles, each defined with a precision that seems out of reach for Stone Age hands, anchor the heart of Göbekli Tepe. At first glance, the site appears chaotic. Pillars rising at odd intervals, enclosures overlapping in the dust. But when surveyors mapped the center points of enclosures B, C, and D, a hidden order came into focus. The lines connecting these three centers form a near-perfect equilateral triangle, each side measuring roughly 19.25 meters. The triangle's main axis, drawn perpendicular to the base between B and C, slices cleanly through the midpoint of enclosure D. This isn't the result of chance. It's the mark of deliberate planning, a geometric principle executed on a scale that would challenge even modern builders without advanced tools. Professor Barbara Hors, an architectural historian, points to the mathematical discipline behind these layouts. The builders didn't just set stones in a rough circle. They worked from a mental blueprint, translating small-scale models or rope diagrams into structures over 20 meters wide. The central T-pillars in each enclosure stand exactly at the geometric heart, aligning with the enclosure's axes to within a fraction of a degree. Even the enclosure walls, though battered by time, follow arcs so regular that modern laser scans overlay seamlessly atop the ancient stones. The margin of error is often less than half a degree, a level of accuracy that requires careful measurement, not guesswork. Archaeologists debate the tools behind this precision. There's no evidence of written plans, metal compasses, or measuring rods. Instead, the consensus points to ropes, pegs, and a practiced eye. By fixing a rope at a central stake and walking the perimeter, workers could trace perfect circles in the soil, then mark pillar sockets at calculated intervals. The resulting geometry is not only aesthetically striking but structurally sound, distributing the weight of massive stones evenly around each enclosure. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that the arrangement of the circles and their main axes may have been tied to points on the horizon or even to the stars. One study mapped the axis of enclosure D and found it deviates from true north by just 0.4 degrees, the same offset as the bright star Deneb would have shown in the sky around 9,600 BCE. While the evidence for intentional stellar alignment remains debated, the precision of the layout is undisputed. Each circle, each triangle, each axis speaks to a level of architectural understanding that seems at odds with a world before agriculture or the written word. The site's geometry is more than an aesthetic choice. It forms the underlying logic of Göbekli Tepe, a framework that organizes the pillars, the carvings, and the spaces between. This measured perfection is not the product of improvisation, but of a shared vision executed across generations. The question is not just how these circles were built, but why such exactness mattered so much to the people who raised them. Animal figures crowd the surfaces of Göbekli Tepe's pillars, each one carved with a clarity that invites more questions than answers. Foxes stretch along the western faces, their bodies in motion as if chasing the sunrise. Lions appear almost exclusively to the east, jaws parted, muscles tensed, always facing the direction where the sun climbs highest at the summer solstice. Scorpions group toward the south, their tails curled and claws open, echoing the arc of the constellation Scorpius as it rises over the horizon on warm Neolithic nights. This is not random decoration. Archaeologists cataloged the reliefs, mapping their positions across more than a dozen enclosures. Patterns emerge. Foxes nearly always face west, lions east, scorpions south. Vultures, snakes, and wild boar fill the spaces between, but their placement follows a logic that repeats from circle to circle. The clustering of these animals in specific zones hints at a system, possibly a code, that goes beyond simple storytelling or totemic display. Dr. Salim Yalcin, whose research focuses on Neolithic iconography, describes the arrangement as intentional zoning. He points to Enclosure D, where the central pillars are flanked by foxes on the west and lions to the east, while a scorpion guards the southern arc. According to Yalcin, this is not just artistic symmetry, it is a deliberate sequence. In his view, the builders used animal motifs as markers, encoding directions, seasons, or even celestial events. He notes that the fox, for example, is a symbol of dawn and cunning in Anatolian folklore, while the lion's placement toward the east could reference strength at the rising sun's apex. The scorpion's southern position aligns with the path of Scorpius, a constellation prominent in late spring and early summer. Ethnographic parallels strengthen the case for symbolic meaning. Across the Fertile Crescent, ancient communities marked time and ritual with animal imagery. Later Mesopotamian zodiacs and Anatolian myths echo these associations, though no written records survive from Göbekli Tepe's builders. Some researchers suggest the reliefs form a kind of visual calendar, with each animal marking a key moment in the solar year or a significant point on the horizon. Others propose that the carvings reflect mythic stories, passed down orally and fixed in stone for gatherings and ceremonies. The evidence is compelling, but the code remains unbroken. No inscription or direct key has surfaced. Yet, the repeating clusters, the orientation of each animal, and their strict placement across multiple enclosures suggest an underlying system, one that may have guided rituals, marked the passage of time, or mapped the heavens above. The mystery deepens when considering the deliberate burial of the site around 8000 BCE. If these carvings held knowledge, astronomical, calendrical, or social, then the act of hiding them beneath tons of rubble may have been as meaningful as the carvings themselves. In this way, Göbekli Tepe's animal reliefs do more than decorate stone. They hint at a worldview where art, time, and the cosmos are tightly bound, waiting for their meaning to be revealed. At Göbekli Tepe, the final act was not construction, but concealment. Archaeologists working layer by layer uncovered a story written in sediment. 2 meters of tightly packed limestone rubble, bones, and broken tools poured in from all sides. The fill was not the slow work of wind and time. Microsediment analysis shows a jumble of stones and soil mixed quickly and pressed down, sealing the enclosures almost overnight. Beneath this blanket, the pillars and carvings remain untouched by rain or sun, their surfaces sharp and fresh, as if the builders meant to lock them away for good. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal trapped within the deepest fill points to a narrow window, around 7,950 BCE. The fires that burned here, the last to flicker among the stones, cooled just before the rubble came. For nearly 3,000 years after, no one built or even camped on this hill. The archaeological record stands silent, a gap with no pottery, no burials, no sign of return. The tell grew only by the slow settling of its own weight, not by the hands of later people. Professor Barbara Horace, reviewing the stratigraphy, describes the burial as deliberate and systematic. She notes the absence of weathering on the exposed pillars even after millennia underground. The fill is too clean, too even, to be the work of chance. No other site from this era shows anything similar. No mass burial of monuments, no ritual hiding of knowledge on this scale. 15 years earlier, the world had emerged from the Younger Dryas, a time of cold and chaos. Now, as the climate warmed and new cultures spread, Göbekli Tepe was quietly erased from view. The reason for this great concealment remains as puzzling as the stones themselves. In 2024, a new wave of scientific investigations swept through Göbekli Tepe. Dr. Lina Yilmaz, a materials chemist, led a team using inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry to analyze residue in the tool marks of the central pillars. The results were unexpected. Manganese traces, well above background levels, lined the grooves. Manganese occurs naturally in limestone, but the concentration and pattern suggested something more deliberate, perhaps a unique stone selection or an unknown process in preparing the surfaces. No evidence of copper, resin, or exotic compounds turned up, but the anomaly deepened the puzzle. Meanwhile, ground-penetrating radar units, operated by Dr. Amir Çelik's team, mapped the hill's unexcavated layers. The scans revealed a labyrinth beneath the visible enclosures, at least 17 more circular and rectangular structures, each echoing the geometry of those above ground. Only 5% of the site has been opened so far. The radar images hinted at a scale and complexity still hidden beneath centuries of soil, suggesting that the known enclosures may be just the surface of a much larger network. Geneticists joined the effort, extracting fragments of ancient DNA from rare human remains found in the fill. Sequencing revealed a mix of haplogroups H2 and J1, typically spread across Anatolia and the Levant. This diversity points to a gathering place, not a local village, a destination for people from distant regions, drawn together before the rise of cities or states. To test the limits of ancient construction, experimental archaeologists spent 4 months replicating pillar extraction and transport using only period-accurate tools. The effort stalled. Flint picks wore down quickly, and wooden sledges splintered under the weight. Even with teams of volunteers, the pace lagged far behind the estimated timelines. The experiment ended with the pillar still half buried, the method incomplete. Despite modern planning and resources, the secret behind Göbekli Tepe's construction remains out of reach, amplified by every new discovery. Göbekli Tepe's secret aren't just buried in stone, they're buried in what we think we know about human origins. As modern science reveals new anomalies each year, the boundary between myth and history blurs. What else lies just beneath our assumptions, waiting to rewrite the story of civilization? Sometimes, the oldest questions are the ones we're least prepared to answer. What's your theory? Let's talk in the comments.